high above the muddy trenches and shattered villages of Europe, where clouds mixed with smoke and the roar of engines echoed through the sky, a new kind of warrior was born. In the early years of the First World War, airplanes were still a recent invention. At first, they were used only for observation, quietly drifting over enemy lines to gather information. But as the war grew more desperate and more violent, pilots began to arm their machines. Soon, the skies became a new battlefield. And in that battlefield, one man would rise above all others. His name was Manfred von Richthofen. To his enemies, he was a nightmare. To his allies, a hero. To history, he became a legend. They called him the Red Baron. Manfred von Richthofen was born on May 2nd, 1892 in Breslau, in what was then the German Empire. He came from a wealthy and aristocratic family with a strong military tradition. From a young age, he was taught discipline, duty, and loyalty to his country. Hunting was one of his favourite activities as a boy, and he developed a deep love for precision, patience, and competition. These early experiences would later shape the way he fought in the sky. As a teenager, Richthofen entered military school and trained to become a cavalry officer. At the time, cavalry was still considered prestigious. Soldiers on horseback symbolised honour, speed, and tradition. When the First World War began in 1914, Richthofen proudly joined the army, expecting to fight as a mounted officer. But modern warfare had little use for cavalry. Machine guns, artillery, and trenches made horses almost useless. Richthofen soon found himself stuck in routine tasks, delivering messages and supplies. He felt frustrated and bored. He wanted action. He wanted challenge. He wanted to prove himself. Then he looked up. Above the battlefield, airplanes were beginning to play a greater role. Pilots were becoming the new knights of the sky. They were fast, daring, and independent. Richthofen saw an opportunity. In 1915, he applied for flight training. Learning to fly was not easy. Early aircraft were fragile, unstable, and dangerous. Crashes were common, and many pilots died before ever seeing combat. Richthofen struggled at first and even failed his first test, but he refused to quit. Through discipline and determination, he improved. Soon, he earned his wings. At first, he served as an observer, sitting behind the pilot and operating a camera and machine gun. During this time, he met one of Germany's greatest pilots, Oswald Boelcke. Boelcke became his mentor and taught him the principles of aerial combat. These rules, later known as the Dicta Boelcke, emphasized teamwork, positioning, surprise, and discipline. Richthofen learned quickly. In September 1916, he scored his first confirmed aerial victory by shooting down a British aircraft. This moment changed his life. He realized he had found his true calling. From that day forward, he dedicated himself completely to becoming the best fighter pilot in the world. Unlike many pilots who relied on reckless bravery, Richthofen fought with careful calculation. He studied his opponents. He observed their patterns. He attacked only when he had the advantage. He preferred to strike from above and behind, where enemies had little chance to react. He once said that he did not hunt for excitement. He hunted for success. As his number of victories increased, so did his reputation. German newspapers began to write about him. His superiors noticed his skill. In January 1917, he was given command of his own fighter squadron, Jasta 11. It was here that the legend truly began. Richthofen decided to paint his aircraft bright red. In a sky filled with grey, green, and brown planes, his stood out immediately. Some believed he did this for vanity. Others thought it was psychological warfare. Enemies could see him coming. They knew who he was. They knew what he represented. Fear. The red airplane became a symbol. British pilots called him the Red Baron, referring both to his noble background and his distinctive colour. The name spread quickly. By early 1917, air combat had reached a terrifying level. The period known as Bloody April saw enormous losses for British pilots. Richthofen and his squadron dominated the skies. Using teamwork and discipline, they overwhelmed enemy formations again and again. During this time, Richthofen achieved most of his victories. He developed a ritual. For every enemy plane he shot down, he ordered a silver cup engraved with the date and type of aircraft. He treated combat almost like a sport. But behind this system was a grim reality. Each victory meant lives lost. Despite his success, Richthofen was not reckless. He avoided unnecessary risks. He believed that survival was part of victory. Many pilots burned out quickly, becoming exhausted or careless. Richthofen maintained strict control over himself and his squadron. However, even the greatest pilots were not invincible. In July 1917, Richthofen was shot in the head during a dogfight. His aircraft barely made it back to friendly territory. He survived, but the injury had serious consequences. He suffered from headaches, dizziness, and fatigue. Some historians believe he may have had lasting brain damage. Doctors advised him to rest. He refused. Richthofen returned to combat too soon. He felt a deep sense of duty. Germany was struggling. The war was turning against them. He believed his presence in the air was necessary for morale and defence, but he was no longer the same. After his injury, some comrades noticed changes. He became more withdrawn. He seemed tired. He took more risks than before. The careful hunter was becoming more aggressive. By 1918, the war was reaching its final phase. Germany was under heavy pressure from Allied forces. Supplies were low. Morale was falling. Yet Richthofen continued to fly. On April 21st, 1918, he took off for what would become his final mission. That morning, Richthofen and his squadron were patrolling near the Somme River in France. During the flight, he noticed a young Canadian pilot, Wilfrid May, who had become separated from his formation. Seeing an easy target, Richthofen pursued him. But in doing so, he broke one of his own rules. He chased too low and too far over enemy territory. Other Allied pilots joined the pursuit, including Canadian ex Arthur Roy Brown. At the same time, Australian soldiers on the ground began firing at the red plane with machine guns. In a matter of seconds, Richthofen's aircraft was hit. A single bullet passed through his chest. He managed to land his plane in a field, but the wound was fatal. He died shortly after, at the age of 25. The Red Baron was gone. When Allied troops reached his aircraft, they realised who he was. Instead of celebrating, they treated him with respect. He was buried with full military honours. British pilots attended the funeral. Wreaths were placed on his grave. Even his enemies recognised his skill and courage. At the time of his death, Richthofen had achieved 80 confirmed aerial victories, more than any other pilot in the war. This record stood unmatched for decades. But his legacy went far beyond numbers. He became the symbol of the fighter pilot. Calm under pressure, skilled beyond measure, loyal to his comrades, devoted to his duty. In Germany, he was celebrated as a national hero. Schools, streets, and military units were named after him. Books and films told his story. His image appeared on posters and stamps. In other countries, he became part of aviation mythology. Even among former enemies, he was respected. Over time, his story grew larger than life. Some portrayed him as a romantic knight of the sky. Others saw him as a tragic figure, trapped in a brutal war. Some criticised the glorification of combat. The truth lies somewhere in between. Richthofen was not a bloodthirsty killer. He did not enjoy death. But he was a professional soldier who believed in his mission. He lived in a time when nations demanded total loyalty. He followed the path set before him and mastered it better than anyone else. He once wrote that he did not think much about the enemy pilot as a person. He focused only on the task. This emotional distance may have helped him survive psychologically, but it also shows how war forces people to suppress their humanity. Today, more than a century later, airplanes are faster than sound. Missiles travel miles in seconds. War has become remote and technological, yet the story of the Red Baron still fascinates us. Why? Because it represents a moment in history when combat was personal, when pilots looked into each other's eyes, when skill and courage mattered more than machines, when individuals could still shape battles. Manfred von Richthofen was a product of his time, a nobleman turned air warrior, a hunter who mastered the sky. A young man who achieved greatness and paid the ultimate price. His red airplane no longer flies, his engine is silent, his battles are over. But his name remains, written in history, remembered in stories, echoing through the clouds. The Red Baron. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Leave a comment below with your thoughts, and let us know what topic you'd like to see next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.